Good morning. Today we're going to be looking at significant figures, specifically what are significant figures and how to round to significant figures. So make sure you have a pen and paper ready and we'll get started now. Before we get into significant figures, we're first going to have a quick recap on rounding. Now, this is something you should know already before you start this. So I'm going to give you a minute now to look at these 4 questions and see if you can complete them. Okay, now check your answers. If you have made any mistakes on here, or you're not sure how to round, it will be very helpful if you look back on how to do this, as it'll definitely help with what we're doing today. What we're going to look at now is what is a significant figure, and what is the first significant figure in a number. Now, as you can see, that top number there, 560, I've already said that the first significant figure, or the first significant digit, is a 5. This is because it is the first number of value that we have in that number. So, without me giving you any more prompts, what I would like you to try now is to try and figure out what the first significant figure in each of those other numbers are. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to do that now. Now, these are the answers. So, as you can see, for 17.12, the first significant figure is going to be a 1. This is because it is the first number of any value that we have. As for the next one, the first significant figure will be the 4 in the thousands column. This is because, again, it's the first digit in that number with value. Now, out of these, the only one that might catch you out is the fourth one, 0.00023. Now, you might be tempted to write 0 as the first significant figure. This isn't the case. The answer would actually be 2, and we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail later. The last two should be more self-explanatory. So the first significant figure is going to be 4, and finally, the first significant figure would be a 1. Now, when we talk about significant figures, we tend to round to significant figures. So I have a list of numbers here, all of which have been rounded to one significant figure. So we have 345 rounds to 300, 46 would round to 50, and so on. Now, looking at these numbers here, can you deduce a way to round 56,321 to one significant figure? Okay, let's take a closer look at this question. So we have the number 56,321. Now, the first thing we need to do here is identify the first significant figure in that number. So the first significant in this number here is the 5. Now, like when rounding anything else, we're going to look at the number next to the 5. So in this case, the 6. Now, as the 6 is bigger than 5, that means we round up. So we're going to round that number up. We're going to round the 5 up to a 6. So our answer is going to be 60,000. Okay, let's try the same again, this time with another number. So we're going to look at 2037. And again, we're going to try to round this to one significant figure. So again, let's take a look at this number, 2037. The first thing we need to do is identify the first significant figure. In this case, that's the 2. Again, we look at the number next to the 2. So the 0. Now, a 0 is less than 5, but that means we're going to round down. So that number rounds down, the 2 stays the same, and our answer would be 2000. Finally, one more example. We have the number 6003, and again we're going to round this to one significant figure. So we take the first significant figure, which is a 6. We look at the number next to it, which would be a 0. This means the number is going to round down again. So that means the 6 stays the same, and our answer would be 6000. Now, I'd like you to look at this question now by yourself. Have a read through and see if you can explain what her mistake is. Okay, so what we should have noticed reading this is we have a number 1234 and it has been incorrectly rounded. The answer Lara gave is 1200. Now, what she should have done is she should have identified the first significant figure, which in this case is the 1, and then rounded the rest of the number down, which means her answer should have been 1000. Now, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to have a go yourselves at rounding numbers to one significant figure. Get your pen and paper ready and have a go now. Okay, time to check your answers. Now that we've learned to round to one significant figure and identify the first significant figure in a number, we're now going to look at identifying the second significant figure in a number. So here you'll see we have a table. What it's asking you to do is identify the second significant figure in each number. I'm not going to give you any more information than that just yet, and I would like you to see if you can figure out what the second significant figure in each number would be. Okay, so here we have the answers. So for the first question, 17.12, we're going to start from the left-hand side of the number. We know the first significant figure is going to be the 1, which means the second significant figure in that number would be the 7. Same for the next question. Again, starting from the left-hand side, first significant figure is a 2, which means the second significant figure is an 8. For the third one, the first significant figure would be a 1, meaning the second significant figure in this number is a 0. And finally, for that last number, the first significant figure would be a 4, meaning the second one would be a 0. Now we're going to look at rounding to two significant figures. So we have the number 3,548, and the question is asking us to round it to two significant figures. So the first thing we need to do is identify what the second significant figure is. So starting from the left, we have a 3 and then a 5, which means the 5 is our second significant figure. I'm then going to look at the number directly to the right, the number that comes directly after the 5, which in this case is the 4. Now the 4 is going to tell us whether to round this number up or down. As the 4 is less than 5, that means the number is going to round down. So our answer to this question is going to be 3,500. Okay. If we have the number 250, again, we're going to try and round this to two significant figures. So our second significant figure we're going to find first is the 5. If we look at the number directly to the right of this, we have a 0. So that 0 is going to tell us that the number is going to round down, and so the 5 will stay the same. So the answer would be exactly the same. It would stay as 250. It's already at two significant figures. Finally, this last question here, we have 1.475. Again, we need to identify the second significant figure first. So our first significant figure here is a 1, which means the 4 would be our second significant figure. Again, we're going to look directly to the number next to it, the number directly to the right, which in this case is a 7. The 7 is going to tell us whether the number rounds up or down. So the 1.4 will round up, which means that 4 becomes a 5 and we get an answer of 1.5. Now you could write 1.500, but the zeros would be redundant, so we don't need them and we just leave it as 1.5. Exactly the same as rounding to one decimal place. Now I'm going to give you 4 minutes this time to round each of these numbers here to two significant figures. Now check your answers. We're now going to look at rounding to significant figures that's greater than 2. So first we're going to look at rounding to 1 significant figure, then 2, and then we're going to move on to rounding to 3 and 4 significant figures. First, a recap on rounding to 1 significant figure. So we know we have this number here. We're going to take our first significant figure, which is an 8. Look at the number next to it, which is a 2. That's going to tell us it rounds down, so our answer would be 8. For 2 significant figures, we're going to take our second significant figure, which is a 2. We're going to look at the number next to it, which is a 5. Now 5 means we round the number up. So this means our answer would be 1,300. Now for 3 significant figures, we have this decimal here, 3.141592. So again, we start like we did with 2 significant figures. We're going to start from the left, which is our first significant number, 3. Our next significant figure, or our second significant figure, will be 1. Which means the third significant figure in this case would be a 4. Now we're going to take the number next to it like we did before, which is a 1. This tells us that the number will round down. So in this case, it's sort of like rounding to 2 decimal places. So this rounds down and our answer would be 3.14. Again, we don't need all of the zeros that would follow, so we just leave them out. Now, if we take this massive number here, 8,234,512,000, we want to round that to 4 significant figures. So again, we start from the left-hand side of the number. We have 8 is our first significant figure, 2 is our second significant figure, 3 is our third significant figure, which means the 4 is our fourth significant figure. So we've got our fourth significant figure. Again, we look to the right of that to find the next number, in this case, the 5. Now this tells us that we need to round that 4 up. We need to round the number up. That means when we round that up, our answer would be 8,235,000,000. So as you can see, the 4 is rounded up to a 5. Now, what I'd like you to try, based on what we've already done today, is to round these numbers to the number of significant figures listed. So, for example, the first question there, I want you to round to 1 significant figure. Second question, 2 significant figures, and so on. You have 2 minutes starting from now. Now time to check how you did. Now, I would like you to look at this next table. We have some values on the left-hand side, and what the question's asking us to do is find out what the first, second, and third significant figure of each number is. Now, I don't want you to write anything down just yet. I would like you to think about each one and what each significant figure might be. Now, when we see numbers, decimals like this, with lots of zeros at the front, it's very tempting to think the first significant figure would be that first zero before the decimal point. The problem is, this zero doesn't actually have any value. So, the first significant figure of a number like this is the first number which has value to it. So for that top number there, the first zero has no value. And then the next three zeros don't add anything either. So the first significant figure would actually be the 3, which means if we keep counting along, the second would be a 5 and the third would be a 7. Same for the second question there. Our first significant figure would actually be the 2. Those zeros at the beginning do not count as significant figures. Now, we need to be aware when we're doing this that from our first significant figure there, the 2, that 0 that follows is a significant figure, which means the second significant figure of that decimal there is a 0. So our first significant figure is a 2, the number after that is a 0, so that is our second significant figure, which means the third would be the 1. Finally, the third question there, we have 0.05 and so on. Now, the first and second 0 don't have any value. They are not counted as significant figures, which means that 5 is our first significant figure. The number that comes straight after that is a 0, which does have a value. So that is our second significant figure. And the same for the next 0, which is our third significant figure, which means the fourth would be 1, fifth would be 2, sixth would be 5, and seventh significant figure would be an 8. So we're going to start rounding some decimals to significant figures now. We have a decimal here, 0.78. Now, as we've just discussed, that first 0 doesn't count as a significant figure, which means the first significant figure in this case would be the 7. And this is the number we're going to round. So we're going to look at the number to the right of that, directly next to it, which is the 8. Now the 8 tells us it rounds up, so our answer would be 0.8. Again, we're just rounding to one significant figure for now, so we have 0.0037. The first thing we need to do is identify that first significant figure, which, as we discussed, isn't that 0 there. Our first significant figure, in fact, is the 3. Again, we look at the number directly to the right of it, which is the 7. 7 rounds the 3 up, and so our answer would be 0.004. Now, this time we're going to round to two significant figures. So again, it would be tempting to think that one of the zeros is in fact the second significant figure. But we know that's not. The first significant figure is the 2, which means the 5 is the second significant figure. So again, we look at the number directly to the right of that, the 8. That tells us we round up, and so our answer becomes 0.0026. Now, we're going to start just with one significant figure. I would like you to try these 4 questions. Only going to give you a minute to do that. Round the numbers to one significant figure. Okay, now check your answers. Now, this here is a prime example of someone who's making a typical mistake. We have Mabel, who wants to round the number 0.001254 to one significant figure. Now, she says the answer is 0. After what we've discussed today, we should realise this is definitely wrong. The reason is she's rounded that first number, the first 0 she saw, and assumed that was the first significant figure. Now, we know that the first significant figure in this number is the 1. And so that is the number we're going to round. So our answer should be 0.001. We've now got some questions on rounding decimals to different numbers of significant figures. I would like you to try this yourself. We've discussed how to do each of these, and I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to do that. Okay, now check your answers. We now have two exam style questions. What I'd like you to do is pause the video now and take your time to work through these. Now let's look at the first question. So the question is asking us to round the number 516.158 to two significant figures. Now if we're to do that, we know we look at the second significant figure, which is a 1, and the number next to it, the 6, tells us to round it up, which means our answer should be 520. Now the question's asking us, however, to explain Tom's mistake. So we need to see what he's done wrong. Now we can see his answer, 516.16, definitely isn't the same as ours. So we need to figure out what it is he's done. In this case, it looks like he's rounded his answer to two decimal places. Now, this is something that comes up often. This is a common mistake that people will do. they will round to decimal places instead of significant figures. So this is something we need to be aware of when we're doing things like this. Now for our final question, we've got a lot of numbers and it's asking us to do two things. It's asking us to round to one decimal place, and it's also asking us to round to two significant figures. So what we need to do is go through each of those numbers rounding to one decimal place and then go through them again and round to two significant figures. Once we've done that, we need to find numbers that are equal, and then we need to find ones that are different. So once we've done that, the two answers we should get are those two circled there. Reason being, if we round those to one decimal place, our answer in both instances would be 44.5. So the 44.48 would round to 44.5, as would the other one. But if we were to try and round that to two significant figures, our answer for the one on the left would be 44, but the one on the right would be 45. That's all we've got for today. If there's anything from today you're still unsure of, do go back through the video and look at some more examples. Thank you.